want to make sure.
Yeah, I was testing it while you were playing.
Oh my gosh, you recorded me.
No, I deleted. I recorded and then I deleted.
You can.
So, did you say that you have done a CD?
Yeah, multiple bands, multiple CDs.
Okay, all right.
CDs aren't really the thing anymore, unfortunately.
Records.
Like I don't even have a CD player.
So what do you do for your music?
What do I do for my music?
I mean, as far as when you listen to music for enjoyment, how do you listen?
I listen on car radio, band practice, or I guess, and my phone.
Ah, phone.
Yeah, and so I could get whatever I want on my phone and then connect it to the speakers throughout my house.
Mm-hmm.
And like Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
or I have a playlist built in. I created a playlist. My son has a playlist. My daughter has, my wife, and so we'll just tune in. Like I got 100 songs in my playlist, and I'll just tune it in and have it on repeat.
Mm.
Yeah. How about you?
I like CDs. Okay.
Money and politics. Want to do that one first?
Sure.
All right.
Looks pretty good. It looks okay. All right. Yeah, and all those videos are on that card too. So at some point I have to move them over.
I feel like we could, I mean, like, there's so much, I could see, I mean, there's so much dead space all around us that we should maybe even either pan in or scoot the camera closer. What's your thoughts on that?
This is, Kevin, really, it's fine.
It's okay?
It's fine, yeah, it is.
All right.
Let me see, what was I asking you? What did I just ask you?
How do I listen to music?
No, after that. Oh, it never got out of my head. Okay, never mind. All right, so are you ready?
Money and politics.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, this is episode 11 of Country Dog, City Dog, Money and Politics.
What is today's date?
Today is the 20th, I think. Yeah, March 20th. Monday,
March 20th. I gotta make some phone calls. There's a couple birthdays, including my brother's. Daryl, happy birthday. It's on recording.
Okay.
All right, I'll get that one.
Okay, and ready to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Country Dog, City Dog. This is Kevin Levy.
And I'm Don Merrill.
And today we are going to talk about money and politics and how that can relate to anything urban, anything rural, anything connected to a divide when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that there's that much difference in the way voters give to the political candidates that they care about, but I think it really comes down to the candidates that they actually give to. I'm not really sure why money in politics has as much to do as it does with how people end up supporting the candidates that they care about. But
Hey, is it cool if we just start over? I'm sorry.
oh yeah.
Let's start from yeah. Thanks.
Just didn't like it, or
I think I got sidetracked when that was kind of, yeah, and I know I could, you're great, I just know I could do better. Even though I didn't really say anything, I think I got sidetracked with that.
okay.
And then, and that.
Okay. Okay. Country Dog, City Dog. March 20th, episode 11, Money and Politics. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Country Dog, City Dog. My name is Kevin Levy.
And I'm Don Merrill.
And today we are going to discuss how money in politics can potentially play a part in an urban and rural divide.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how people give to their candidates is all that different between people who live in urban environments and people who live in rural environments, but the candidates themselves are really different. And how money gets allocated based on what those candidates do is very different. So yeah, that's money in politics as it applies to people who live in rural areas and people who live in urban areas is very different. And as we'll find out, the government is in the middle of redefining what rural and urban even mean in terms of federal support for communities, and that has a big effect on how people end up supporting their candidates and getting money for programs that they care about.
Yeah, you know, there's special interest groups, there's super PACs, there's lobbyists. They are all giving to politicians in order to further their beliefs or their industry beliefs or the lobbyists who they're backing. And it's not really in anyone's best interest except for those corporate interests that are donating and the politicians that are receiving. I don't believe that it's in the best interest of the American people, the Oregonians to be specific. Regardless of where we live, our politicians should not be accepting large donations from super PACs, from possibly even dark money is what some people, we should know where our politicians are getting their money, which in my belief should be 100% publicly funded by you and I, not by multi-million-dollar corporations that are trying to get some of their policies passed and then giving $1 million to a political party in order to help influence laws and policies to be passed in their favor.
Well, you know, there's a long history to that. I mean, part of the history of why we don't always know who is donating has a lot to do with the tax status of the recipient organizations. You know, because if you have an organization that is organized, you know, under 501c4, I think it is, because there are different nonprofit designations. I have a 501c3; it's public charity. But you have 501c4s, which are like benefit corporations or other designations. And the thing about those organizations is you can have donors and you can keep the donor lists, in some of the cases you can keep the donor lists private. And that was important during the Civil Rights era because the NAACP received money and people who were white who were donating to the NAACP didn't want anybody to know that they were donating to the NAACP. So the law was set up in such a way so that these people were protected. Well, now what happens is, you know, you have a super PAC, and the super PAC, if they're organized under the same kind of protection, people can donate to those PACs, and you never really know who donates to them. And so, you know, the same law that protects NAACP donors also protects, you know, super PAC donors. And, you know, the other thing about that is, you know, you have people who, like, the campaign finance laws are also set up, like thanks to Citizens United, you know, which was the case that involved Hillary Clinton. The Supreme Court said that unlimited amounts of money could be given
Travesty.
to third party, like to organizations that are not necessarily associated with the candidate. So let's say you have candidate A and candidate B. Candidate A is a Republican, candidate B is a Democrat. Okay. Campaign finance rules may say that both candidates can only receive up to, I don't know, $100,000 or something like that. But each candidate may have a super PAC. And the super PAC is not limited by how much money it can get. So it can get millions of dollars. And then it doesn't give that money to the candidate per se, so they say. But it does benefit the candidate because now those super PACs can buy advertising. And they can just smash the other candidate with all this dark money. I mean, it's not exactly, I mean, dark money is in a different category, but, you know, these super PACs that fund this advertising, it's not the candidate's money, but it's the money of the PAC that supports the candidate, which is not limited by any kind of campaign finance rules. So that's why, you know, the money in politics thing with regards to Citizens United and with regards to the protection of people who donate to nonprofits, they don't want their names to be made public, you know, those laws existed and exist for the good, and they also exist for the bad.
Yeah, you know, if you are living in rural America and there there is a super PAC, there is dark money that's trying to influence an elected representative that's representing rural America, and this dark money is, I don't know, giving an example, they want to create a toll on the road throughout a rural city to donate more money. I don't know, but is that in favor of the people that live there, when in fact it's just a politician being heavily influenced by money? Or let's bring it into the city. If there are politicians that are receiving large amounts of money from the gun industry, for example, in order to make it so you do not have permits for the city to purchase a gun or being able to carry guns wherever you want, when in fact it is it's been polled that folks in Portland, for example, the big city here in Oregon, would prefer that not be the case. But money in politics can play a big part in how the laws are decided. And I personally feel if it's I know it might be hypocritical, but if it's a nonprofit, and you're trying to only do good, then should you allow money in politics? Maybe, maybe not. But what I personally am specifically against is things that cause death or destruction to people or to the planet. And who might some of those be? That I'm just going to call them the big five, who I would like to stop seeing donations to all political figures whatsoever. Would be the oil and the gas and the fracking companies, and the military industrial complex, and the NRA and gun industries, and the pharmaceutical and health industries, and the big banks and the finances. Each one of those, in one way or another, they have helped to cause death or destruction to the planet and the people. And those big five right there, I feel if we could just get money out of politics from those five, would be huge in my view.
Oh, Kevin, you're making my head hurt.
Yeah.
Because each of those industries, when you talk about the banking industry, I think about Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has not had the best reputation, and it's been taken to court so many times for doing so many things to its customers. And you have companies like ExxonMobil who have been involved in so many oil spills. You have the NRA, which seems to facilitate gun shootings rather than help mitigate them. Every industry that you mentioned, yes, has a bad reputation. But at the same time, they are also representing interests that a lot of Americans agree with. Like NRA supports gun rights, and gun owners go straight back to the Second Amendment. And oil companies, they've produced plastics, and they've produced, they put gas in our cars. And the banking industry, rising tide, good economy lifts all boats, and all that stuff.
I'm not in favor of banishing them altogether, but just banishing their hundreds of millions of dollars into our elected officials.
Kevin, you understand? You understand that when corporations that are set up as corporations have a fiduciary responsibility, and the fiduciary responsibility is to return maximum profit to shareholders. That is their job. So however they do it, whether it's ethical or not, and they're not going to tell you if it's unethical, but however they do it, that's what they're going to do. And, it's really hard to separate one from the other. It's really hard to say, okay, we want you to do good, and good costs a lot of money, but we don't want you to make money in order that you use that money to, in part do the good that we want you to do. It's like human nature also, like splitting people apart from, their good side and their bad side. But this is what happens when we start talking about stuff that is specifically about urban, rural, and we end up talking about the much bigger picture, which is what is hard about this show, is that the specifics are buried in the details, and the details need to be talked about, even though it seems like they're general, but they're not really general. They're very specific. So I wanted to talk about the parties. I want to try to go back to the parties a little bit. We were talking about the urban-rural money in politics, and parties evolved, around the 1930s when FDR's New Deal, the Democrats sort of formed around the unions, and unions were industrial, and industrials were cities, and so, and that happened again in the 80s when the knowledge economy came, and, Democrats sort of formed around the knowledge economy. Again, those were located in cities, urban concentrated. And then, as diverse populations came up in the cities, the gay community, the LGBTQ community, African American community, people of color, those communities also became affiliated with Democrats. Meanwhile, the same thing was happening in the rural areas, right? People in rural areas, they formed around farm unions, they formed around, outdoor organizations. And so, it's kind of easy to see how it was set up, how society sort of got split between urban and rural. And so, the parties, that's kind of where their power base came from, and so because of that, you have the situation like during votes and elections, Democrats can win a lot of the, it can happen where Democrats can win a lot of seats, but not necessarily get a majority in their district, because they may represent a small, concentrated part of a district, but they're surrounded by, Republican voters. So, you might have a district that might have one Democratic stronghold, but it's surrounded by 8 sparsely populated Republican districts. So that's one of the reasons why, when you start talking about how the money is distributed, a lot of it has to do with, where are the seats of power, and like if you look at a map of the United States, you'll see that most of the Democrats are along the coasts, and most of the Republicans are in the center of the country, the sparsely spread out part of the country, whereas Democrats are in, heavily concentrated cities like Chicago and New York and Boston, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle. So how money gets distributed has a lot to do with, where Republicans are versus where Democrats are.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with friends of all political parties, all different things that they believe in, and one thing that I feel I hear common is they want to know, where are these politicians accepting their money from? Where are they getting money from? And do they always vote in favor of the industries that are giving them money? Or is there a link where every time they receive money, there always seems to be a vote that benefits them? And that's something that would be really good to know. I would love to somehow set up a very transparent website where it says politician A has received $50,000 from this industry, and politician A has also, coincidentally, voted continually in favor of this industry. And not that it's automatically going to mean, oh, there's a corrupt politician, by no means, but it would be just good to know to follow the money. It would also be good to know, are politicians leaving Congress to then become lobbyists? So then these new lobbyists kind of have a backdoor entrance right into Congress to help their lobbyist industries get these laws passed. Maybe we should set a ban of no politicians going into lobbyists for 5 years, and to help prevent this revolving door and things like that.
Well, the things that you want already exist. If you go to the Oregon Secretary of State website and click on campaign financing for any candidate, you can get a list of everybody who contributed to that candidate in whatever election they've run for. There are several candidates who, ran for seats in the House, then they ran for seats in the legislature in different election years. You can go to each election year for that particular candidate, click on campaign finance, and it will show you every company and individual that has donated to that candidate over a certain dollar amount. I think in Oregon, a dollar amount.
And will it show also how that individual politician has voted?
Well, this is what I wanted to tell you. So after it shows you over $250, all campaign contributions. Then you go to the legislature's website, and the legislature's website has a voting record history. So for whatever bill you're interested in. So let's say it has to do with pollution. Okay, let's say it has to do with water pollution. So you go to, now you see that candidate A has received a total of, $40,000 worth of campaign donations from, 5 or 6 different chemical companies, okay, in the 2020 election. So then you go to the legislature's website and you look and see what committees is that candidate on. Okay, if that candidate is on the, Environmental Resource Committee, then okay, well, there's a connection there, because no one's going to give money to a candidate who doesn't work in an interest that they're interested in. So if that candidate is in the Environmental Resource Committee, you can say, oh, well, there's a connection. 5 campaign contributions from chemical companies and a legislator who is on the Environmental Resource Committee. And then you look at the votes. They're on the Environmental Resource Committee, but did they vote in favor of legislation that limits the amount of pollution, or did they vote against that legislation? So now, see, you have to go to 2 different places, but you can end up getting the same information. By the way, that's just how reporters do it. And so, and the last thing you wanted to know was lobbyists. So, do people who leave office end up working in jobs that, are sort of like beneficial to them, parallel to what they did when they were in the legislature? Well, that one is more of an intuitive thing, but I mean, it's almost a common sense kind of thing. If that person decides to leave the legislature as a member of the Environmental Resource Committee and then goes to work for one of those 5 companies, you can make a pretty good assumption that of all the things that they could have done when they left office, they went to one of those companies, right? And so now you have that information. Now what do you do with it? See, that's the problem. It's like, what do you do with that information now that you have it? Your best way to affect that legislator is while they're still in office, because once they get out, they're a private citizen now making bank.
Right.
What do you do?
That's a great question. What do you do? What do you do? I would say a lot of it has to do with knowledge, giving better, I feel confident enough to say everything you just said, Don, about people already have that knowledge. There's also a website called Open Secrets that has all the knowledge of where campaigns are coming from, and then how you can also track down how legislators vote. But I would say the majority of our listeners might not know about this,
and the majority of our listeners are busy. They got a life to live. Some of them are trying to find, you sell houses. You have a real estate license. You know how hard it is for people to find housing, for people who are trying to find work, for people who are trying to get child care or health care or transportation and insurance. People are busy. They don't have time to be going to the website looking to see who did what candidate A did. They don't care about candidate A.
So do you feel we should just let it be? Just if my elected representative is taking huge gobs of money from a chemical company that happens to be polluting their waste product into the local stream, well, I'm just too busy in life.
I'm not saying that, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
All right. So there are plenty of people out there who are like us, or who listen to our show, I hope, or who are just wanting to get involved in the community and wanting to keep an eye on politicians. Those people are out there. There are watchdogs, among the citizens and within government. So no, it's not like a total loss. It's not like these people get away with murder. It can be made. Their life can be made difficult. In journalism, the saying is, you comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So I mean, it's like there's no reason why people who are getting away with stuff should continue to get away with it if there are some among us who have the means to make sure that they don't.
I have a question. Do you think a politician should ever be recused from voting on a specific policy or law when they just received, for example, a $20,000 donation from a chemical manufacturing plant that just donated $20,000 to this politician, and then sure enough, the following month there happens to be a bill on the floor that involves that direct chemical producing company? Do you think that politician who just received the donation should ever be recused as well as the broader picture of other receiving contributions, should they ever be recused because there could be a potential conflict of interest?
Do I think so? Yes, but it's like, it's not up to me. It's up to the ethics rules that the legislature has come up with. And if the ethics rules say, well, they have to meet this threshold and they haven't met it, then they're not recused. I mean, you know, we allow the legislature, we allow our representatives to create laws that are supposed to govern them and govern us. And so once those laws are in place, you know, the laws work whether we like them or not, and if we don't like them, then we have to change the laws. But the way the laws are set up, and I know that in some states, they have put, in fact, I think even in Oregon, they pulled back on their ethics commission. Something about the ethics commission recently just changed. And, you know, it reminds me of, you know, wolves watching the hen house sometimes. You know, but anyways, Kevin, we're still not talking about money between rural and urban, and I wanted to say something about that. So right now, during the end of the Trump administration, he pushed something that would sort of redefine what rural and urban is. The Office of Management and Budget, along with the census, sort of looked at what was considered rural. Like, so many people in an area, if there weren't more than a certain number of people in a certain area, it was considered rural. And if there were more than a certain number of people in a certain area, it's considered urban. And the more people you got, the more heavily urban. And the less people you got, the more heavily rural. But there's a change working its way right now through administrative law, where that rural definition is changing. And so that means there will be more people now considered rural. And there will be less people considered like very rural, and more people considered like mid-rural, like suburban, like suburban. And why that's important is because it has to do with the representatives of those areas, because now there's more people in those areas, and so that means those people have more political clout, and what that means is that those people can now get more money through their legislators for things that matter to them, because now that there's more people in those areas, the tax base is bigger, which means they can command more of their legislators' attention to bring more money to those areas. Meanwhile, people who are living in very rural areas, they don't have lobbyists, and so they're likely to get even less money for their schools, for their libraries, for their roads. And meanwhile, the people who are in the urban areas, they now have to fight with these larger, quote-unquote, rural areas for money for their schools, for their urban problems, you know, for homelessness and, you know, things that are really concentrated in the urban environment. So the reason why I wanted to bring that up is that is directly where the politicians that we put in office, because of this change, they're going to have a lot more say over where money goes and how money gets there, and it's something that I would think that, you know, listeners and voters probably should pay a lot of attention to, because they just had a hearing yesterday. The Office of Management and Budget just yesterday looked at this rule of, you know, these areas, metropolitan statistical areas is what they're called. They just sort of like finished the public comment section yesterday, and so now this thing is moving forward. So it's really important for people to pay attention to how this may end up affecting how money for your communities is distributed, you know, with the help of your politicians.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel money in politics is creating a huge divide in America, in every state by state. These politicians that are receiving money, they're using it for advertising, they're using it on social media, and it is causing a divide. They're pushing their beliefs and oftentimes telling how the other party or the other opponent that they're running against is completely wrong and creating this strong divide. I feel if we just get money out of politics, it'll just help to smooth the divide. And I know, like, the Supreme Court doesn't agree with this. They're going to allow unlimited amounts of money. But I feel if for example, you live in a Republican-led state, but you believe strongly in climate change, and you are passionate about climate change and the environment, and I feel no matter how often you write or call in or go to your congressman or senator's office, I feel if they're getting large gobs of money from the oil and coal industry, it will just fall on deaf ears. Getting money out of politics will be the single best thing.
But Kevin, how do you do that? We only got like 2 minutes left, but how do you do that? How do you, I mean, everything we've said, whether it's
maybe start with the
allocating
Supreme
money
Court.
or whether it's people donating money, I mean,
I know it's easier to talk about than actually get it done, but it all comes down to the vote, getting more people to vote for Congress and politicians that represent their beliefs, and then the more that there are, the more that change can be implemented and change can happen.
you talk a lot about education. I mean, do you think it has to do with like educating people as to the differences? Even though I know that sometimes educating people is sort of like the thing they want least.
Right.
But from someone who they don't want to be educated by. But I mean, what do you think it's a matter of like just showing people like you say you care about this, but your money is actually going here? I mean, how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a start. That's a start. Letting people know how money influences politicians and the vote, even if it's voting against yours and everyone in your entire community's best interest. Like a politician sometimes, not always, follows the money. You get money out of politics, and then all of a sudden elected representatives work for everyone and not just the special interest groups. And it's just so vital. It's just so important.
But the thing about money in politics, I mean, I think in the end, it's like anybody who has a job. They make as much money as they can. And, in business, people are always complaining, oh, CEOs are making 1,000 times more than the average worker. And no one says, people say, well, that's not right. But American capitalism says, oh, that means they're successful. That means that everybody should be like them.
I applaud success.
Exactly. And so some people would say, well, successful politicians are kind of the same way.
I just don't applaud the success where I'm going to donate my $1 million to a specific candidate just so I can make sure that what I want that's going to benefit me directly or my company is going to change and influence how his laws and policies affect everyone else. But, we would love to hear from you, and we would love to hear your thoughts on money and politics. And you can just go to countrydogcitydog.fm and scroll down to the bottom and write to us. Reach out, contact us, let us know your thoughts on what you believe in this.
Yeah, it's countrydogcitydog.fm, and this is, like I say every time, we always end up talking about these subjects that are so broad, but it's all about starting a conversation. And thanks for giving us, a few minutes of your time. And I'm Don Merrill.
I'm Kevin Levy.
Thanks for listening. Cool.
What do you think?
They're all so, Kevin, it's like I have no idea how to do this. I have no idea. I mean, not just this. This is a little easier because, I've done something like this for a long time. But the subjects themselves, they are just so impossible.
I know.
They're so impossible. I mean, money in politics. How do you stop a politician? How do you stop, first of all, in order for someone to go into politics, they have to have somewhat of an ego.
Right.
Okay. So now, this person who has an ego has been validated by hundreds of thousands of people who want that person's attention and are willing to do anything to get it, including give them money, which they want.
Right. Because
it increases their own personal power, it increases their legislative power. It's so human nature-y. I mean, how do you separate the ego from the honorable public servant? I mean, how do you separate the politician from the public servant?
I feel there are a lot of politicians out there that are very vocal in their campaigning that they will not accept money from any super PACs, special interest lobbyists, or corporations. My campaigns will be 100% publicly funded.
And that's exactly why those guys will never get on the ballot.
But no, there are a lot of politicians that win.
Well, okay, you'll have to give me a list of politicians who say, we won't accept campaign finance contributions from big corporations, we won't accept money from super PACs, we won't accept money from people who are trying to influence our campaign. You have to show me who those people are.
Next time we meet up, I will do that.
Yeah, and and I don't mean somebody who's working as a dog catcher. I mean somebody who's like, head of the Senate or something like that.
Sure.
Okay. All right, let me save this.
I've got me some almonds, some love, some kids. Oh boy, gerrymandering's coming up.
Yeah, and see, gerrymandering is really tied to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, it really is. There's definitely going to be time for you and I disagree, or you just think I'm clueless, but honestly my favorite line is when you're just like, Gavin, you're making my head spin. I like that. I mean, there's like a month ago, you're like, sometimes when moments are awkward or just like uncomfortable like that, maybe that's what they want to hear. And so maybe when you're just thinking, I'm just like...
No, it's not... See, my wife loves the fact that you're optimistic, She is also a very optimistic person, And we have these conversations all the time about the complexity of optimism. Because it's easy to be pessimistic, just say no to everything. But it's hard to be optimistic, because when you're optimistic, that means you have to try to, defend the optimism in light of all the pessimism. Like, how do you do it?
Right.
How do you find good when there's so much bad? And how do you determine whether or not the good is as successful as the bad is successful?
Right. I'm going to be showing a...
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, oh, and you're a real estate agent. Should I have said that?
That's fine.
Okay, all right.
You didn't create a call to action. Like, you're a real estate agent. If you need to buy a house, you should call Kevin right now.
Right.
You didn't do that. And I'm fine with that.
In
In fact, you can do it again.
So I probably won't. But I mean, I was just thinking about not wanting to call you out, in ways that you don't necessarily want to be called out.
Nope, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm never going to promote myself on here. Like, please call me if you're looking to buy a home. I'll never do that. But I don't mind it being known that I'm a realtor. I don't think there's any harm in that.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, all right. I think I have one of these.
Yeah, what's up?
What are these? Are these like M&Ms or something?
No, they're chocolate and then yogurt covered almonds.
Oh, okay.
These are kind of addicting, it's not fair.
Who's Lily?
Who's Lily? I don't know. Is there someone named Lily on that cup?
Mhm.
I got that at Goodwill a couple of years ago.
I love Goodwill.
I can only guess that Lily created the cup.
Yeah, but getting back to this change,
Uh-huh.
as rural areas are redrawn and rural, extreme rural areas get smaller and these suburban slash rural areas get bigger, like I said, there's going to be fewer, the legislators representing the remote rural areas are going to have less power to deliver money to their districts because these other rural areas have been expanded. And so they're going to have almost as much power as like some of the urban areas, but their classification is going to be different.
Right.
So that's going to cause a real problem, I think, for communities like, where I live, because they do get money from the state and the county to supplement their road building and, agricultural work and county extension work and all that stuff.
Right.
And it's one of those things, it's one of those kind of things that's like obscure, like nobody pays attention to it, right? Because it's so geeky and in the weeds that nobody really cares about. I mean, it's not sexy like train derailments, But
Train derailments are not that sexy.
But I mean, when I say sexy, I mean, in news it's like something that really gets people's attention. That's sexy, not necessarily in a good way, but that it gets people's attention. Like disaster porn. So I think that when this thing goes through, these little communities are going to realize, oh my God, we're going to have even a harder time getting money for, things that keep our communities alive. Money for our schools, money for our libraries, money for our hospitals, because those legislators, they bring in federal money that support the local money.
This is all good conversation for our next episode.
We just had this conversation.
Well, we could slightly modify it. I mean, it's money in politics and gerrymandering, while have similarities, are not the same.
Oh, you're talking about in this conversation, gerrymandering. Okay.
I've been drinking so much in that last episode, I have to pee again. My gosh.
Okay.
I'll be right back and then I'm ready.
Okay.